Hello, welcome to Biomechanoid Blues. I'm Andy Popovic, and I'm going to be your host on this edition of Noir Alley. Just kidding. I really couldn't do Eddie Muller justice, but I am here to talk to you about, well, noir. It's November, or Noirvember as some folks know it, and I am going to be not only writing for an anthology for Zombies Need Brains called Noir, but also participating in a panel at the World Science Fiction Convention about fantasy noir. I certainly talk about it a lot. Anybody who's hung out on my Twitter feed knows that every Saturday night I'm watching along with the faithful at the side of the Czar of Noir, Eddie Muller, and, well, putting on a little old-style look and feel while watching some films from the classic noir era. But it leads to a lot of questions, basically. So, first off, what is noir? How do you know what it is when you see it? And how does it actually apply to, science fiction and fantasy? Well, let's talk about noir first, and let's discuss sort of what is it. I mean, you probably recognize it just from watching this whole opening sequence. It's, guy in a fedora sitting down, having a hard drink, probably not Schlivovitz, but, well, waiting for a lady to come in, take everything he's got and turn it upside down. Probably a private detective on a case, looking to see what's going on. Well, that's only one aspect of noir. And it's the one that's most famous. I mean, Bogart made his bones playing folks like Sam Spade and Philip Marlowe. He was a star made for it. But that wasn't the only thing that was there. How about this? Noir film. It's basically about an insurance salesman. The guy that you know from, My Three Sons, who falls so deep in love with the idea of having money and a girl and everything he wants that he basically risks it all and ends up with no money, no girl, and a gunshot wound as he's narrating his dying moments. That's double indemnity for you. Or a guy who is, on his last legs as a boxer, trying to get one last honest fight through, and the world around him is conspiring to make sure he's never going to fight again. That's Robert Ryan in The Setup. One of my favorites, Woman on the Run. A lady in San Francisco who's kind of estranged from her husband, finds out that he has gone on the run after watching a gangland hit, and desperately tries to find him before the police and the folks who are designed to make sure he doesn't show up in the witness box find him. Or one of the other ones there, Narrow Margin. Basically, it's all contained on a train as a cop, Charles McGraw, as hard-boiled as they come, is looking to escort a witness to against a gangland killer. Or, well, I could keep going on like this. I mean, we've got everything from desert noir, like Ida Lupino's The Hitchhiker, which just involves two unlucky guys on a trip picking up the wrong person at the wrong time, to Argentinian noir, Los Tallos Amargos, The Bitter Stems, is probably one of the bleakest films about a man's ego failing and how it leads him to self-destruction. It can go everywhere for noir, and it covers a lot of things. So if it's not about the hat, or the hard liquor, or the old typewriters, or the smoking, or the John Alton chiaroscuro lighting, what's it about? Well, that's where I've got some thoughts. And I have really three ingredients that I think go into a noir cocktail. Ingredient number one, flawed characters. Now, I'm not just talking protagonists and antagonists, I'm talking everyone there. Noir came from a tradition that took the hard-boiled writing of the 30s, basically the works of folks like Cornell Woolrich, Dashiell Hammett, and Raymond Chandler, and married it with expatriates from European cinema escaping the war in the 40s to come up with a different view of the world. And one of the key things that they added into the mix was the idea that everybody's got a flaw. Folks have obsessions, needs. They're willing to do things that, lead them down bad routes. They're breaking down at some places there. If you ever watched the original Maltese Falcon with Humphrey Bogart, yeah, Sam Spade's not a nice guy. He's downright vicious at points. And he is ostensibly the good guy in all of this. So everyone has flaws, especially the protagonists. And notice I'm not using the word hero there. Another Bogart film, Deadline USA, where Humphrey Bogart plays a crusading journalist trying to keep his paper up and running long enough for him to, basically tell off a mobster. Well, guess what? He's willing to do that even though it endangers himself, his family, his job. He's lost everything because he's willing to give up going on a principle there. His reward at the very end isn't necessarily a happy home. It's the sound of the presses running, and it can be a bitter victory. So that's the first thing there. I mean, if you're looking for noir, you're looking for folks who have cracks in them, flawed people, compromised people, people who are willing to do things that, might put them out there in the world. So why are they willing to do all of this? What's driving them? Well, that's the second part, and it's the part that I like to call myth busting. And it is also another aspect of the fact that the original noir film movement came from a mix of Depression-era hard-boiled writing where the American dream was literally in a soup line waiting for a chance to get rescued, and people who were escaping from fascism, who came to America and could see it from an outside view. Film noir, especially in the classic era, was as much about poking holes in the great myth of the American dream as it was anything else. I mean, Double Indemnity. What is driving Walter Neff to go after this woman, the money around her and all of that? Well, it's his vision of what he deserves out of the American dream. He wants the big house on the hill. How many films have you seen from, Crossfire, The Killing, all of these movies where it's a bunch of crooks who are coming in there for one last big score that they can retire on. I just need to do this one job and then I'm going to be set. I won't have to do this anymore. I'll be able to live the life that I want to. That's pretty much the dark side of the American dream. And this idea that, we're not going to get it no matter how hard we work, no matter how much time we put in. Other folks that got it, they're the ones who live on the house. They're the ones who are hiring the private investigators. we're not going to be able to get access to it unless we rob, cheat, steal, and we're pushed to desperate hours to do this. It's not, the sunny side of things there. It's certainly not, the gleaming, pro-America view that would come in just a few years after the classic period ended, when a lot of these folks who were writing these stories started having trouble with the House Un-American Activities Committee. But that kind of criticism of what society is supposed to offer versus what you're actually getting out of there is an integral part of it. And you'll see that questioning in every noir movement that came forward. When the Japanese had their noir phase, it was all about questioning the old structures there. With the Germans, it's definitely about post-war noir. Look at Black Gravel and the questions about who are we and what did we do. Argentinians, oh man, the Argentinians were all about quietly questioning essentially the way society should be, especially given who was running things at the time. And they were taking real risks. It wasn't just being blacklisted there. I mean, there was a point where you made a film that certain people didn't like in those places, you vanished later on. But that's part of it. You can't really have a noir film that in the end has a celebration of family, friendship, and all of those things there. Well, you can, but usually that's the Hayes office and the studio tacking something on. When the next generation of noir came in, when neo-noir hit, they weren't restrained by that. That's when you'd get movies like, Body Heat, Chinatown, Cutter's Way, Live and Die in LA, where they were willing to take the wheels off and say, all right, let's say what we really need to say. So that is the second thing, a questioning side of this. And I think the third thing, and this is kind of a unique item there, is a sense of melancholy. A sense that the world is in autumn. Maybe that's why Noirvember works so well. This idea that, the better days that we were all promised are fading out. Summer is gone, our innocence is gone, and now we're watching the leaves fall off. And the colors may be beautiful, but soon those branches are going to be icy and cold, and we're going to be outside. So that's always going to be part of this sensation there. That's one thing the cinematography in noir has always communicated. That's one thing the hard-boiled language has always communicated. Film noir is the only place, and noir storytelling is the only place where somebody can describe a person as gravy on top but arsenic underneath and be absolutely dead sincere about it and have it work. So there is that little dash of bitter in the cocktail. But the great thing about all of these elements is they're not fixed to a rain-slicked city or black and white versus neon color. They're not tied to a specific time or place or country. They're all intrinsic character points. They're narrative structures, they're ideas. And you can transport them anywhere. I mean, with science fiction, the most famous example is, of course, Blade Runner. But I also like to point out to things like George Alec Effinger's, When Gravity Fails. I mean, that is as hard-boiled a noir book as you can get. It's entirely set in the future. Cyberpunk owes everything to film noir and hard-boiled writing. William Gibson was channeling John Brunner and Raymond Chandler in equal parts when he was working on Neuromancer. So there is a mix of all of those things, and you can transport them anywhere. Don't have to look any further than your TV screen. Watch the first season of The Expanse. If Thomas Jane doesn't say noir to you in that series, I think you need your eyes checked. and possibly need to lay off the booze a bit, because he is basically a Dashiell Hammett character that is alive and living in an asteroid in our solar system. And he's doing much the same thing that most noir protagonists are. He's compromised. He's trying to do the right thing, even though it's costing him everything. And he's pointing out, essentially, all of the ugly little flaws that we've got in our world. So yeah, even way out in space, you got an old school detective who's got a woman who is turning his life upside down and a hat on his head to keep the rain off, even when there isn't any. Oh, by the way, yes, this is a real fedora. I actually got this from the same store that Humphrey Bogart got his. Know your hats. So, what do I sum up to this? Well, if you want to know more about noir, Noir Alley on Turner Classic Movies, midnights and 10 a.m. There's also the great book Dark City by Eddie Muller that's in a revised edition. He's expanded it, talked a lot more about not just films and other new discoveries there, but a lot of the women who worked behind the scenes. There were ladies all over noir, not just in front of the camera, and not just Ida Lupino directing, but writing, producing, bringing these casts together. So definitely check that out. And the next time you feel that itch to step into the shadows, to, turn off the fill lights and keep everything a little high key, remember, doesn't necessarily need to be a PI who's doing your digging around. Doesn't necessarily need to be, somewhere in an urban area. The shadows are always there, whether or not you're in suburbia or the desert or the jungle or a space station somewhere out in the dark of the solar system, or a fantasy world where elves are out there roaming the streets, living the high life, while, goblins and trolls are sitting there planning one big score so they could finally get out and retire on that island of their dreams. Welcome to the shadows. As it was said in The Scar, it's a bitter little world, but you can get used to it, and after a bit, starts to feel like home. Well, that's all for now. I'm going to pour myself another drink, put on a little bit of jazz, and see if I can crank out a few more words before the sunrise comes and grabs me. Take care. Be seeing you.